Wake Up with Patti Katter.
I love the show.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
I turn it on and turn it up.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to and watching Wake Up with Patti Katter, and I am Patti Katter. Today, I have Michael Stein with me on the show. Michael, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Patti. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love it if you just go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, Michael Stein, I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders. And the reason why I do a podcast like that is because I consider myself a long shot. My backstory goes as follows. My grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps on the way to America. And my dad was a New York homeless street kid, became a multimillionaire, and then only to become homeless again. And later on in life, I was born premature, health issues, ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, weird stutter. I was put in a special school at UCLA called Fernald School for like 6 months when I was a kid. They didn't have all these aphorisms now. They didn't know how to diagnose it. They just said, kid's hyper. He doesn't speak up when he's supposed to speak up. He's too loud when he's supposed to be quiet. So I just had a lot of issues, a lot of health issues. And I really didn't have any success until, I'm making people laugh. That's what I did my whole childhood. I was around a lot of dysfunctionality. My dad was notorious for having crazy Hollywood orgy parties, which will segues into my connection to Boogie Nights and the Dirt Diggler story and all that. And I really didn't have any success other than making people laugh until one day, like most American boys, I saw the movie Rocky when I was 10 years old. And I said, here's a guy like me. He's not successful. He's not considered smart. He keeps on getting knocked down and keeps on getting back up. But he's funny. And he's funny. But the only difference in this guy and myself is that he's physically fit. So from every day then on, I made physical fitness my cause célèbre every day. So by the time I turned 16, I became a physical fitness trainer. I was known as somebody that was physically fit. And I was like, that's the second bit of success I've had, because I was also the funny guy. So then I said, well, I know what I want to do now. When I wanted to be like my dad, who was an entrepreneur. He was known as the calculator kid in the 70s. He made millions of dollars selling these calculators when it became small. I said, I want to be the calculator kid. So I told my high school tutor, I said, I want to be an entrepreneur, a stand-up comedian, and an actor in that succession. And she goes, well, you might want to work with your hands because not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. And I said, screw you later. She's just being nice. I said, screw you. So then I started business a day after I graduated high school and I failed miserably. And I said, well, maybe she was right. So then I go take some courses at City College, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I took business, theater, and psychology. And psychology was a big thing about, you're a neurotic Jewish kid. Psychology is really big in Jewish families, so I took that to understand what was wrong with me or what can I do better about myself and understand an art form of selling in business and all that. So then 6 months later, I decided I'm going to do stand-up comedy. I was 19 years old, finally going to do stand-up comedy. And I packed the house and I did fairly well. And I said, I could do this with nightclubs. And Los Angeles nightclubs in the 80s were big. So I start within 6 months, I open up a nightclub. It becomes a number one nightclub within 6 months after that in my age bracket in Los Angeles. And I was the number one nightclub promoter. And I went on to meet a lot of people that way. My career kind of like took off. My first acting role shortly thereafter was in Paul Thomas Anderson's short film where I play Dirt Diggler in the Dirt Diggler story, which became Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. And I got to work with Peter Guber and John Peters, who produced Batman, Rain Man. They won an Academy Award that year when I did a big premiere for the movie Batman. The biggest premiere party at a nightclub is 4,000 people for a movie. I think you could ever. I've never heard of that one, and I really felt like, what I could do more. So then I said, I'm going to finally be an actor, and I'm going to leave my nightclub business, which was crazy in retrospect because I was like making a lot of good money and probably could have just done the same thing. But I said, the only way I could become an actor, because I always felt like no one would hire me. And, no one would hire me for business because I was just hyper and awkward. Even then, after I had some successes, people liked my energy, but I was still awkward, I think. At least that's what I thought. And I left my nightclub business and, started to direct documentaries on nightclubs and house music. And I went around the country for 4 months. I directed and produced a documentary on the history of house music in 1993 and doing concert events, around the event that I produced, came back, and that failed. So I said, you know what? The only way I'm going to become successful as an actor, as a filmmaker, is to just burn the boats. So I left my nightclub business completely, and I became a production assistant in commercials for 4 years. And then I said, I'm going to make a movie like my friend Paul Thomas Anderson did. He did a half-hour short film drama, did well, segued into a film career. So then I did that. And then the short film I did called Rituals and Resolutions did great. Got bought by HBO and made the second pass of live action, for the Academy Awards. And it did really well for a short film. And it got me close to a movie deal that would Joel Silver's office and every office in Hollywood. Trimark Pictures was going to make one of my gambling movies. We're going to make a movie that a screenplay that I wrote on gambling in Los Angeles, underground gambling casinos, which I did when I promoted clubs. And no deal after 2 years. So I said, screw Hollywood. I'm going to make another movie. I'm going to make a movie, a crazy comedy that no one allowed me to make. And the problem was I was broke and I was in debt. And I decided, well, I was just going to become an entrepreneur again. And I wanted to sell something on the internet. And I chose Tarps, which has nothing to do with anything. It's a random product. There's a reason why I chose it, because it does a lot of things and it can be adventurous. And I have a big foundation for the homeless when I was a nightclub promoter, and I could help the homeless with that and do other things. And within 6 months, I made $500,000 for this film, and then I was off to races. I wrote, directed, produced, and acted with Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, and Coolio, a movie called Love Hollywood Style. And it almost broke my business. And I failed in the sense that it didn't make money, but I finished the project. And I said, after this, I said, during this whole process I just told you, and the story that I just told you, I fell in love. I got a wife. I got 2 kids. I said, you know what, Mike, you're going to have to choose that micro decision. Life, chooses passion versus opportunity. And I chose to never give up the passion, but then to burn the boats, but save a raft, right? And then I chose opportunity. I grew in that business since into $100 million plus business. I still have my passions, but I concentrate on the business. And I said, if I'm ever going to do a podcast, it would be about the rise and fall of people and these crossroads that people have, exploiting my journey and personal development, which was along this whole thing. And that's why I do a podcast called Long Shot Leaders. And that's why I'm talking to you today.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Your story is incredible. I too have a little bit of ADD and ADHD,
good.
So I keep up really well with you.
Good. That's good. You got the hyper focus.
It's true. And as a podcaster, for sure, you can interview all sorts of different people and it keeps my mind busy, and it's perfect for me. Podcasting is perfect.
Right.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up, because your backstory about your grandmother and then your dad, I kind of want to know more about how did you grow up as a child, and how did that impact you today?
Okay. So my dad had this tool business, and it was fledgling. He had a partner named Alan Smith. And he says, I'm going to leave the tool business and I'm going to start this calculator business, where calculators became a little smaller. Throughout history, you take advantage of things that come along in waves. The internet, web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, you take advantage of it. So he was the first to sell these. He goes up to Canada and he sells like hundreds of thousands of these calculators. They call him the calculator kid. And he makes, I think, $3 million in like 16 months or something like that, which in 1973 or 72 was like an amazing amount of money.
Right.
He cheats on my mom the whole time, and he was a nice guy. Don't get me wrong. He looked like Elvis and he was acted like Santa Claus, but he was not faithful. And he had crazy parties I told you about. We had limousines and we had, it was crazy. From the time I was like 1 to 6, I was a spoiled kid. And then through all the, sex, drugs, and disco, he lost it all. Now that partner that he had, in 1975, that partner was in the tool business. He opened up a company called Harbor Freight, which is a multi-billion dollar company. And I learned this later on. I was like, wow, that was, growing up around this, seeing 2 different lives, seeing the way that, Alan Smith raised his kids. And so my dad was great. So by the time I was like, 9 or 10 years old, my dad's business, it was gone. He lost all his money. By the time I was like 12 or 13, He was nearly homeless and dead. And by the time he was 14, he went to jail for check fraud, and he spent 3 months in there. And then he came out and he was homeless, living in a van outside of the house that he bought my mom in Encino. Now that segues into, I grew up when my dad took off when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I had to sleep in the same room with my grandmother because I'm the youngest. So I would hear these stories of like, we escaped the Russian concentration camps. That was my alarm clock was Tui, that was like an old Jewish lady hocking up in the morning. So then I would hear that, how you're lucky to be alive. I would hear that my dad, the story about being homeless when he was a kid, and now look at that, so you're lucky to have what you have. And then my mom, because I was a oops baby, and she was a very honest, neurotic lady, very nice though. And she would say, my son, he was a mistake, but I love him. I drank, I ran up and down the stairs. I smoked cigarettes, but he survived. I said, Mom, can you just tell them if you want like ranch or blue cheese? You don't have to tell everybody the story, so basically I would hear these stories about how you're lucky to be alive. And I grew up around a lot of volatility, sex, drugs, and disco. And I think because my brother got involved in a lot of that stuff, and I'm the youngest, and I had a stepdad that was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I grew up with my grandmother, and I saw these accidents in front of me. I think it kind of made me, a little wacky, but I also think it kind of helped me in my desire to get into personal development, which I did when I was in my late teens, early 20s, which was a long journey. You don't go to one seminar and then things are fixed, but I think that helped me. So by the time I maybe saw the movie Rocky, I said, I'm going to build myself like a muscle. And that kind of clicked with me. And I think all the dysfunctionality, I was able to do stand-up comedy about it. And I think it helped.
Mm-hmm. What is one of your hardest trials that you've had in your life?
Well, there's a lot, but speaking of childhood, when you want your dad, my dad, I looked up to him like he was my idol. I want to be the calculator kid, right? So he, said, I'll be home at 8, and he'd show up in like April. So there was like a lot of, you look outside the window and that desire for your father, that was really hurtful, so then you either date your mother or your father. So when I was dating my first girlfriends, I normally chose my dad as a girlfriend. So they would lie and cheat on me, and, they slept with my best friend. One of them slept with my best friend, so that breaks your heart. So those are some tough trials and tribulations. And that kind of, toughens you up as well. So, but getting broke myself after having success, I don't talk about this often, but I declared when I made a lot of money as a nightclub promoter in LA, or like in the 80s, I was a mini celebrity. And then I left it all to become like this PA, production assistant on commercials. And then I was broke after I did that short film. And then I had to file bankruptcy because everybody promised me money to invest in the film. So that was one of the trials and tribulations. There's been so many. And so many trials and tribulations, but I think that not one stands out. I think they all work in a symphony, but they're blessings, because as long as they don't bottom you out, and you look at them like learning experiences, and I ask myself enabling questions, when it comes to those trials and tribulations, bankruptcy or getting cheated on or whatever, can I do a stand-up comedy routine about this? Can I write a screenplay into it? Can I use this, to make myself more powerful? Who knows what I could use over? Maybe I could talk about it on a podcast one day. So those are some of the hardships that I've had and how I think about them.
Right. And, not a lot of people will admit their hardships either. So that's huge. I know I openly talk about mine because we're all human and we all screw up. So if we don't talk about it, we can't help anybody.
Right. And those embarrassing moments, if you own them, like my dad brought a prostitute to my bar mitzvah. That's not right, Patty. You shouldn't do that. But I think it was an offering. And if it didn't work, maybe it was like something he could fall back on, and I just grew around that kind of stuff. And you have to laugh about it after a while. So one of the darkest times, is I was up in San Francisco. I'm in my early 20s at this point. I'm visiting my dad. He picks up a prostitute and I said, Dad, I don't feel well. I got the flu. I'm going to sleep on the floor of your bedroom. This is before. And then he goes, well, I'll just sleep in the van. He kept the van, even though he's living in a condo up in San Francisco. And I said, great. So I guess, I'm sleeping. I guess he decided he wanted to use his bedroom. So I sit there and he has sex with a prostitute. And I wake up in the middle of it. I was like, that decision you have to make. This is dark shit, but that decision you have to make between like, well, I'm going to say something or I'm not, and And I was just like half asleep and got the flu-like symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I just slipped on the floor. And I was like, that was one of the darkest, if you want to overcome something, I think that was in my sick mind, that was like, Mike, how are you going to use this? How are you going to, that was a dark moment, but everything to me is a laughing moment. So that was, there's a lot more of those, but that's, my life.
Yeah.
And I own it.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I laugh a lot about things that other people might not laugh about, but you have to laugh. I mean, what's the alternative, right?
Right. I mean, there's an alternative, but I'd rather not choose I'm choosing this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, what are you doing today? I want you to talk a little bit about your podcast.
Well, my main vocation is I own a company called Abadak Inc., which owns a company called Tarps Plus, and we're launching a big lifestyle brand called Bolo Tour next year, a big outdoor lifestyle brand. So that's my main, financial, driver. I started a podcast 8 months ago called Long Shot Leaders, which talks about the kind of stories I'm just telling you right now. People that have overcome large obstacles to find success, whether they're mental or physical or spiritual or financial, any kind of, obstacle to find success. We tell those stories. And that's basically, what the podcast is about.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find it?
They can go to longshotleaders.com and they can see anybody from somebody that was homeless for 12 years when they were 12 to 24 to becoming a manager and buying their first house in Omaha, or to a Holocaust survivor, to, a multi-billionaire.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer to this question, so forgive me if this is a hard one. I'm sure your grandmother's probably not alive still because of a year. I think you're the same age as me and I've already lost my grandparents. But when did she pass, and was she able to see like your new company or?
No, my grandmother passed when I was 17 years old. And, she had a really hard death. It was like a 6 month, where her esophagus wore down. She couldn't hold her food down. And she lived with us. So I have a saying, like, I have a high tolerance to, like, if I'm going to be like your roommate in a bomb shelter and we have to stay in there for a long time, I'm the guy, because I don't get tired of people very easily, because I've been around so many situations that are really, the tough. And when you're the youngest, sometimes you're stuck with jobs. The oldest and the youngest in a big family. So, if my great uncle says, I got to go to the bathroom, somebody's got to help me wipe my ass, and all the other older brothers and sisters leave, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the guy that's got to do that.
Yeah.
So that my grandmother died when I was 17, and your outlook on death is different as you get older, but that's when she died, and she died when she was 78 years old.
Mm-hmm. I just wondered, she has a really, really incredible story as a Holocaust survivor. So I think she would just be really proud of you. I just want to tell you that. I'm sure
but she wasn't in the Holocaust. I appreciate that. Okay. She escaped before Hitler did what he was doing, I guess the Russians were putting all the Jews in concentration camps, and like 10 years before that. And she was escaped. So my great grandfather owned one out of two confectionery factories in Kiev. They were like really wealthy with Clydesdale horses and all that grandiose stuff. Mm-hmm. And on the way out of the country, they had to sell everything. They had to get rid of everything and only take what they could take in suitcases. And so they were broke, and they're on the way to the ship. And on the way to the ship, they got held at gunpoint. And my grandmother's my uncle or little brother said, "Please don't kill my family." And I guess they were nice to the Nazis because they said, "All right, let them go," and they got out of there that way.
Wow, that's incredible. I have a friend who's from Russia. He was born in Kiev. Is it Kiev? Kiev, yeah. Something like that. That plaque behind me is from that place. But then I had another guy on my show recently, and he was a Jewish Holocaust, or not a Holocaust survivor either, but he came over here as an immigrant. So same thing. So I usually don't go into detail too much about the history, but it's so interesting to me. So with your dad being homeless to multimillionaire, back to homeless, were you ever to have any kind of closure with him? Because it sounds like it was kind of a turbulent relationship a little bit.
It's another weird aspect is that my relationship with my father was the best in my family because I loved him. And he was like, he was really nice, but really like he'd take advantage of you, or, not in a mean way, just kind of like, yeah, look, and like, or he would like, kind of just take off, but he was very loving. So, and he was like Santa Claus. He'd arrive and he looked like Elvis. He wore all black, dressed like Johnny Cash, strikingly good looking. Women loved him. They always thought he was amazing looking, and guys all my friends thought he was like the coolest person. So it was like Santa Claus came to town. So I just loved him, and we had this great relationship. So I was never resentful. I'm realistic about who he was, especially as I get older and I have a family, because that's become a major priority for me because of, I saw the things that happened. But seeing him grow up, when I was 17 years old, when he was in a van outside of that house in Encino, and I go to school, and I'd be like, Dad, at least I got to see him every morning because he was stuck there, kind of. So I would, because he was fighting, building his way back. And I was happy to see him, so I became even closer friends with my dad as I got older. Mm-hmm. And I had a healthy relationship with him at that point because I knew who I was. My older brother got caught and involved with like sex, drugs, and disco and everything else, and those crazy, notorious parties that, I say this, like my dad, Paul Thomas Anderson, who did Boogie Nights, loved my dad. And he based that character on Burt Reynolds and Boogie Nights, loosely based on my dad's character. And because my dad had these parties, he had this green house with green carpeting, green artwork on the walls, and he had these notorious orgy parties, and everybody partied there and growing around that stuff. So I'd say that I had a very healthy foundation of who I was because of all my other parents and all my other foundation. So I had a great relationship with them because I held strong. Mm-hmm. So I guess that answers your question.
I love that. I just love that. And it's funny how when you're older and you do have your own kids, you look at things a lot differently than when you're in the moment being raised as a child, right?
Right. And to be honest with you, what I'm going to say sounds really strange right now, because if somebody says, well, Michael, what about this? That knows of me. So my dad married later on in life, and we were best friends, and he married somebody that wanted him all to himself because he was a party guy. And she didn't like the prior life of his, and that meant his kids too. So she restricted him. She was from another country, and she restricted him to see his kids. So for the last year or two of my dad's life, I really didn't get to see him that much. And we reached out, and he was kind always, but he would get badgered not to, so I didn't find out my dad passed away until 4 months after he passed away. And it's fine because I know he had, like kind of the Robin Williams dementia, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it kind of dissipated before that. So that was really tough. But, I have a really good job of isolating and compartmentalizing reality. And the reality is that we were great friends. And before those things changed, not everybody's the strongest person in the world. My dad had some weaknesses, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have a part of a relationship was the best relationship you ever had. And it was a funny relationship. But to me, I had a great relationship with them, regardless of even that crazy sad ending.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much. You don't know this about me, but I lost both my parents in 2015. And of course, like you growing up, I had a few things that were a little bit different, not the sex and drugs. But my dad he had a violent temper sometimes, like I should say very angry, at times. However, as an adult, we had such a great relationship, and we were able to put that, on the back burner, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And he just had some issues, he had me when he was pretty young. So, I often try to tell people that, take away the, good parts of a relationship and remember and hold on to those. So I love that you do that. I think it's really, really important.
I concur with you. You could reframe anything that you want, as long as you really got to be honest with yourself, though, if you're going to reframe something. So you try to be as honest as possible, but reframing it in an enabling direction that'll, enable you for empowerment. And that's what we try to do. And that's what it sounds like you've done. And that is so important. That's something you don't learn. Some people learn it early on, but that really is because you're always going to have a relationship that's challenged, or, there's no one's perfect. There's not one big size fits all friend or parent or anything. but then to find the value out of, really what's great about them and then appreciate those parts of it. That's part about being a more higher level consciousness human being, I think.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much for being on the show. This actually turned into something a little bit different than I thought it would be. I was going to try to have you pull more laughs out, but I think that everything we've talked about is so moving.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe I should just do a comedy podcast, one day a week or something, because I never get involved with jokes. On my podcast is drama driven. Whenever I talk to somebody, I'll throw a little bit of joke in there, but it's always drama driven because, it's just where I gravitate towards. But I think that most comedians, I don't know if Jerry Seinfeld, with the exception of him, most comedians really have a lot of baggage, a lot of shit, and that's why they become comedians. They have a need for connection because they didn't get it when they were younger, or, there's just a lot of crap there, so I gravitate towards drama.
I totally get that. Totally. So again, remind everybody where they can find your website, your social media.
You can just go to longshotleaders.com. You see all my socials there. And if you have a long shot story, any way, shape, or form, metaphysical, spiritual, financial, just anything at all, just, contact us. I want to tell the stories of great long shots. It's always so great to hear somebody that has a unique, challenge that they overcame to find success.
Amen to that. Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. You were really great to interview, and I'm so glad to know you now. And I know our listeners are going to get a lot of what we talked about today. So those of you listening, make sure you go over to Michael's website, the Long Shot. Is it longshot.com? Sorry.
Longshotleaders.com.
Longshotleaders.com. I should know that. I had it in my head. Longshotleaders.com. And make sure that you follow Michael on social media. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Michael, do you have any last words?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for your listeners. I really don't take any of this for granted. I just love sharing and connecting, and trying to be, a vessel of, positivity and bring happiness to people. And I'm so grateful to talk to you today. Isn't this wonderful that we can do this? And I grew up in a day and age where you weren't able to. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
I know it. I love it. I know. I'm pretty sure we're about the same age. Just everything that you were talking about. I was like,
I bet you
I can feel this.
I bet you I'm a little older.
I don't know. I don't usually say my age on air, but I'm almost 50.
So. I'm 54.
Okay. So you're just a tiny bit older than me.
All right. Well, you look a lot younger.
Thank you. I'm trying really hard. Thank you everybody for listening. And, until next time, I am Patti Katter.
Thank you for listening to Wake Up with Patti Katter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Follow Patti at Patti Katter on Facebook and Instagram.
Get social.
You can now watch Wake Up with Patti Katter on Amazon TV and Roku.
It's the only podcast I listen to.
Be sure to check out Patti's apparel line, The Patriotic Mermaid, at thepatrioticmermaid.com and on social media at The Patriotic Mermaid.
I love it.